Fragments of silicon. Don't keep them in your pockets.
All right, welcome to a new installment of Fragments of Silicon. I'm your host, Adam, and joining me as always are Petty and Golix.
Hi.
Woo!
Petty?
I totally did not forget to roll over audio devices back to Mike. Don't worry about it.
I'm not, now that I can hear you.
Everything is fine. No paying any attention to the man behind the curtain.
Anyway, right, let's get to the news, such as it is. Golix, why don't you start us off this week?
I don't really have anything going on. I have a little bit of a sore ear for some reason. But other than that, it's been a pretty low-key week. I got my pay discrepancy at work handled. I don't know if I mentioned this, but we got a cost of living increase over the new year, and mine was bigger than it was supposed to be, and I wanted to check and make sure it was supposed to be that, and as I suspected, it wasn't. But they are letting me keep the extra for that 1 week period, which is nice.
Hooray.
Yeah, Team Sweet won the Splatfest. Unsurprisingly, since it was literally more than half of the population, and the way that they work now, that's not a downside.
Oh yeah, I remember like in Splatoon 1, it was more people meant you were probably gonna lose.
Yeah, they've kept recalibrating it, so now it is somewhat whatever it's supposed to be. Let's see. Yeah, I think that's about it.
All right. Petty, it's your go.
Overall, things have been slowly returning back to some semblance of normal, at least compared to the last 2 years. So, hooray.
That's good.
I mean, I guess. I think the only thing I'm not a fan of is, like, if I want to go somewhere, it's not a lot harder to do since Twin and I still can't drive. So I guess that's more going to take some getting used to.
That sounds like something that's going to take a lot of getting used to.
Yeah, you figured for the past 2 years, if we needed to go anywhere, we'd be like, hey, Ma. But yeah, we'll figure something out. Been having to reschedule a lot of doctor's appointments because with Mom working a 9 to 5 now, the only one who can take us to those is my dad, and he has Mondays and Tuesdays off. So anything I can't get on a Monday or Tuesday, I need a 1 month lead time so he can try and get time off for it. Luckily, with him working nights and some weekends, he has time off basically overflowing almost. So it's just a matter of getting it in for it to be recognized in the system and to get somebody to take a shift. I had my upper GI, I guess, results. Everything is quote unquote fine, which I guess is kind of a good and bad thing because we don't know what the hell is causing my intestinal pain. And Friday I was in the ER because I was in a lot of pain and had blood where I should not have blood. If you get my drift, wink, wink.
Outside of you?
Yeah, but it was more.
I'm kidding.
Yeah. It was not a fun evening. 0 out of 10. So yeah, that's been a fun thing. Still have not heard anything about getting my CPAP machine replaced, which is starting to frustrate me to no end. Because I know most of the problem is with my sleep clinic's office because it is god awful. So I may have to call and yell at somebody either end of this week or beginning of next. So yeah, I think gaming wise, Final Fantasy XIV finally got the 6.3 update. Story is good as always. I need to finish the new 24-man story stuff, which I think I only have like a couple quests left in that. And then yeah, still doing raids, though it's been getting a little difficult to schedule those out because people are still doing, holiday things and parties and whatnot. And I've also been playing, I've 100%ed Sonic Frontiers to the shock of absolutely no one. It's almost
It's
like
easier than some of the games like that because the Cocos are freaking procedurally generated and
well, you can also
random
just
and
buy them
respawn.
from Big, so
Right. So you don't have to find every Coco.
oh yeah. And I've also started Cyberpunk 2077. So far, it's been fun. I wouldn't say it's my favorite shooter I've ever played, but it also has kind of some weird difficulty. So it's kind of getting used to that. I'm also used to stuff like Doom, where I'm basically a one-man army killing machine. And apparently you can get like that in Cyberpunk, but you have to work for it.
I mean, it's a role-playing game.
Yeah. I guess I've just been way too playing stuff like, Ultra Kill and Doom and but yeah. I'm probably playing more of that after the show because not having to stream is fun. And I think that's it from me.
And I guess it's my go. Let's see. Not much going on this week. Let's see. Ordered a new skillet to replace one that. How do I put this? Had eggs cooking in it too long and couldn't be removed.
Is it an electric
Was it one of those
skillet?
ones with a non-stick or whatever that gets completely ruined when that happens?
I don't remember, but all I know is the brown stuff wasn't going away.
Fun.
So that's coming on Thursday.
Is it like an electric skillet or just like an on the oven skillet?
It's a regular skillet. Right. There's no need for an electric skillet because I got an electric stove.
Fair.
Mm-hmm.
Like that would be kind of redundant. Yeah. See, got some new compression gloves after the old ones tore, and these fit a lot better.
Mm-hmm.
It's still 3 weeks away from seeing the hand doctor. That should be interesting. And yeah, not a lot going on this week. That's notable. I guess in gaming, let's see. Finally wrapped up Fallout New Vegas. And just kind of been bouncing around between games. Ever had that?
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
To the ADHD kid in the room, yes.
Well, it's more, I just put, 111 hours into a game. Now what? Let's see. I delved into Castlevania Lords of Shadow. Didn't care for it.
Yeah, I have not heard much about those being particularly great.
Now, those were the ones that came out on the 360, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, the ones with the reboot.
Yeah, it's a complete God of War clone, and not a particularly interesting one. It's just, here's the thing: I don't like God of War's camera angles. Anything with that.
The general feedback I've heard is that they're not terrible, but they're not great, and they're also bad Castlevania.
Yeah. Tried to play a bit of Scott Pilgrim versus the World, but Denuvo killed that.
Oh god, yeah.
The fucking slowdown.
And that game's pixel art, so there's no reason other than Denuvo being Denuvo for that.
Yeah, it's I'm like, okay, I know I can run Scott Pilgrim versus the World here, but but fucking Ubisoft decided to cram, well, not only the usual Uplay, but Denuvo into it.
Yeah, I still have it on my 360 and it runs great.
Yeah. And so, well, actually, I've been playing a lot of one of the games I have up for review. Far more than I was expecting, but it uses a solid engine, let's say. I mean, it's still basically Wolfenstein 3D.
Yeah.
Even if it's not as good.
It's hard to fuck up Wolfenstein 3D.
Capstone found ways.
I know they did. I was trying to scrub that from memory. Thanks.
You actually played Operation Body Count.
I tried it at a friend's house. I said no, thank you.
Corridor 7?
That one I do not remember.
Okay. Still having to play anything Capstone. Granted, I played a lot, way more Wisdom Tree than is recommended by the FDA.
I mean, I'm pretty sure the recommended FDA dose of that is in the minutes.
Negative.
Low minutes.
Anyway, so I think that'll about do it for the news for the week.
Mm-hmm.
So, merrily we shall roll along to the interview portion of the broadcast. And this week, we have Chris Lincoln of Optivania.com.
Yes, hello.
Hello, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very good, thank you.
Right, so how we like to get started is we like to get to know the person behind the games, the studio, and all that business. And we do this by asking this particular question. What got you interested in video games, both on a personal and a professional level?
Good question. I've been playing video games since I was 3, pretty much, when my first console was the Nintendo Entertainment System, which my family got back in the late 80s. And the rest of that is pretty much history, because I still develop games for the Nintendo Entertainment System. And that's my main development angle. So I got into that, because I watched my older brothers playing the games when I was a kid, and then eventually once we got the Super Nintendo in the household, I got the Nintendo in my room, and as I got older I played the games and started collecting the games. And until I was about 18, when the internet started to bloom, I discovered that you could actually find ways to develop NES games and modify existing games. So I got into modifying the games. You could download the ROM or find it in the trenches of the internet. This is probably around 2003. And I read some tutorials online that showed how to modify The Legend of Zelda, and I was poking around in the binary of Zelda and changing the dungeons and stuff like that, and I got hooked.
Okay.
So for the last 20 years, I've been pretty much modifying NES games, and as of about 6 years ago, starting to make my own NES games from scratch.
Okay. So I guess we'll focus in a bit right now with the ROM hacking scene, because that's, not a field we cover all that often. So you mentioned hacking The Legend of Zelda. What did you replace the sprites with?
I didn't modify the sprites. I mainly did the dungeons because I wanted to make new levels.
Ah.
And that was my first ROM hacking experience. Eventually, I went into Metroid and other games.
And was it all building new levels?
It started that way because I had played these games a million times growing up, and I just wanted to play new levels of the games, and then got in contact with other communities online of people who were changing other things like sprites and music, colors, and all sorts of parts of the gameplay, the programming. And I thought, well, I could get into that. And so the first game I really modified heavily was Castlevania for the NES. And I spent about a year making my own new Castlevania game with another person who was good at doing art. And that was Castlevania Chorus of Mysteries, which we finished back in 2007.
And how modified did that end up being?
We changed as much as we possibly could. Changed all the levels, the graphics, the music, and the enemies, and a few other little things here and there, and made it a whole new game experience as much as we could.
And did that ever get distributed?
Yeah, on romhacking.net is where we tend to upload the IPS version of the game. You can't put up the ROM for weird legal reasons, but
right.
We did it the way that we're supposed to do it, and over the years I've done other hacks as well and finished those.
Right. So I suppose the question that comes to mind here is, what finally pushed you over the edge, so to speak, and make you want to develop, wholly original NES games?
Eventually, I had enough knowledge of assembly language programming and NES architecture to understand how to make my own NES games. Because when I was ROM hacking, I didn't understand the whole picture. I just knew some things, like how to change levels and how some of the code worked, how to change enemies and tweak things, but not really a whole understanding and grasp of the entire architecture of the NES. So once I got to that point, I thought, well, I can make my own game and have fun with that.
Okay. And that game is Raleigh?
Raleigh, yeah. That was the game I ended up making as my first project.
Okay. And for the uninitiated, what is Raleigh?
Raleigh is a side-scrolling platformer for the NES that plays like a traditional run-and-jump platformer, in which the character goes from left to right on the screen and goes through levels. And while he's doing this, he can turn into a ball, he can throw stuff and jump on enemies and that whole sort of thing. And then as he's going through all these 16 levels, he encounters a boss at the end and then defeats the boss, that kind of thing.
Okay, which is fairly standard fare for the NES.
Yep, and a good first project to work on for the NES to really understand everything and how to make a game and all of that.
Right, and outside of the learning experience, was there any thing out, any other desires fueling your want of creating this game?
Oh, absolutely. I wanted to try a lot of things like make the game unique somehow with lots of different power-ups and different enemies and different special abilities and secrets that the player can unlock and get through the game. And I thought there was just tons of power-ups in the game and little things that the player could do to get through it. And it was a fun thing to experiment and try all those things out. Like the player could blow bubbles and walk on the bubbles and get to higher platforms.
Okay. And was that a particularly difficult feat to pull off on? Well, I suppose I should ask. Now, this is a game being developed on real NES hardware?
Yes, that is correct. It's being developed on real NES hardware. And I think the other challenge I put upon myself, other than just being an NES, was that it was a 40 kilobyte game, which is the same constraint as the original Super Mario Brothers. And so trying to scrounge for space in the code to get all of these things to work together was a big challenge. Probably like 20 to 25% of my time was just spent finding ways to compress data and compress code and scrounge for bytes to get all of it to fit in the game.
That's not a surprise, actually, because, right, how do I put this? I guess secrets of the NES, like Super Mario Brothers was made to be the ultimate Nintendo game, or ultimate NES game. And what I mean by that is this is like Super Mario Brothers was as far as you could push a stock NES, or more specifically, a stock family computer, without resorting to more specialized chips and extra stuff in the cartridge.
Yeah, that's right. Straight up, just plain simple 40 kilobyte vanilla board that runs on the NES.
Mm-hmm.
And they did an amazing job using pretty much every feature possible that displayed what the NES was capable of and making a fantastic game in the process.
Right. I mean, one of the old times here. And according to your website, your design philosophy operated on what would Mario do?
Yes, very much so, because really Mario's kind of like the hero, the original Super Mario Brothers, because, what did that game do that was special and put to life, how does the game develop as it moves along? What kind of discovery do the player get to unfold as they play through the game? What kind of neat gameplay features, like for example, the turtle shell enemy is a really unique thing to Mario, and that inspired the duck enemy I have in this game that you can pick up and use to fly around.
Mm-hmm. And I suppose the question here is, how did you deviate from Mario? Especially since, looking at the trailer footage and all that, you are pulling off some tricks that Super Mario Brothers 1 never did.
Yeah, I put in a lot more power-ups, and I tried to make the game kind of more fast-paced to where the player didn't need to like hold B to like run, so they could kind of go through the levels much quicker, kind of more like Sonic the Hedgehog does, but not quite that fast. just to like have this continuous flow of gameplay. There's never really a point where you really have to stop and slow down and like hit your head on a block or something like that. One thing I did to make sure this would happen was instead of putting the power-ups in boxes, I put them in flowers so the player could run and collect them as he was running.
Right. And what sort of power-ups do you collect in Raleigh or Raleigh?
You can collect like balloons to make you float around. You can collect a cake that makes you have the ability to befriend enemies as you walk up to them and they'll give you prizes. You can collect marbles to throw. You can collect bubbles to blow. And you can collect all sorts of different unique power-ups, like a ice cream that slows down all the enemies, and just a lot of junk food, basically, with magical powers.
Like, it's an impressive array, if I'm being honest, especially at Super Mario Brother 1 levels here. I mean, Mario only had the one power up. If you don't view the star as, I guess 1.5 there, because the star isn't retained. Anyway.
Right. Mario made up for it, of course, with all the blocks and coins and other discovery items in the game.
Yeah. I mean, it was Super Mario Brothers 3 that really unleashed the trend of having a lot of powers for Mario.
Yeah.
Yeah, 3 has a bunch of. You could. One of the reasons why 3 it seems like they were having a lot of fun with it is because it's the one where they threw in like 2 or 3 power-ups that you can only get in a very few places and exist almost entirely for fun.
Mm-hmm.
Like the Hammer Brothers suit.
That needs to make a comeback. And just needs more love in general.
I think one of the new games had a Boomerang Brothers suit, which is kind of similar but not as cool.
Yeah. Anyway, so putting aside the technical details for a bit, what's the story of Rolly? Is Rolly the character you play as?
Yes. Raleigh is the the character you play as, and he's just a forest animal that's trying to save his forest from basically social disorganization and chaos. The story is a bunch of snakes have moved in and they just kind of want to live, but it's causing a lot of conflict among the woodland creatures, and they're all getting angry and selfish, and Raleigh's out there to put a stop to it.
Okay. And how many levels are there in the game?
There's 16 levels.
Now, when you say levels, is that like actual levels, or is that worlds?
It's levels. So
yeah.
It's you're out in the forest every 3 levels, and then every 4th level is a cave level. That's a bit tougher, and you fight a really tough boss at the end.
What did you put in as far as bosses go?
The bosses are at the end of each level is a boss, and it's pretty much a copy of a certain enemy, but is a little bit harder. So at the end of level 1 will be a snake. At the end of level 2 will be a rabbit, and so on. And these are common enemies in the game, but they're contained in one screen and will attack the player. But in the end of the caves, there's a very large snake that spits a lot of marbles and is kind of tricky to fight. And the final boss is also a raccoon like Raleigh, and he'll jump around and try to attack Raleigh the same way that the player would.
Okay.
And I had to do bosses as copies of the enemies because I'm working with 40 kilobytes, and it's
Right.
the way to do it. You recycle the AI, but in an interesting way.
Well, it's either that or you build one enemy and you recycle that. Not just Super Mario Brothers, but Adventure Island did that.
Yeah. Right. They had that same boss at the end of every fourth level, but his head changed or something like that.
Right. So, like literally no room for a boss each stage or whatever. And from what I'm reading here, this game does have a 2-player mode, but it's an alternating 2-player mode.
Correct. The two players can swap at any time on screen. So it's like a tag team play where the player pushes select and then switches to the other player.
Okay, so Donkey Kong Country, not Super Mario Brothers style.
Well, I've never played Donkey Kong Country, but I suppose you're right.
Well, this is an actual 2-player mode, right? Like the purple squirrel is player 2?
Yes.
Yeah. So.
Well, no, just from the context of it being similar to Mario, the first thing I was thinking of is, one player has a go at a level, and then the other player has a go at the level, and it swaps back and forth whenever you die. Whereas in Donkey Kong Country, you can swap out by pressing select, assuming you have your second party member. And it works that way in 2-player too. That's why I was saying that.
Right.
So it's not like completely the other person might as well just leave the room, or it'd only be one controller.
At any rate, so as I understand it here, this game took you about 3 years to develop?
About 2 years. The span of development was 3 years, but I dropped 1 year of development to work on a ROM hack. And then went back and finished Raleigh.
Okay.
And that was about part-time work level of working.
And what was it like developing your own wholly original game versus a ROM hack?
Kind of a different coding experience. I needed to not use a hex editor anymore, and use actual assembly writing in a different environment in Eclipse. It was really just not too much different, I guess, because you're still designing a game.
Right. But I suppose it's good to know that the leap wasn't too dramatic, like it would have been, say, had you switched over to making an NES-esque game in, say, Unity or something like that.
Correct. That would have been much harder of a transition if I were like using a completely different platform to develop on.
And this game also had a Kickstarter campaign in the month of September of 2019.
Yes.
So, what was it like developing a Kickstarter for this? And would you do that again for future projects?
I would do it for future projects. I think it's just a secure and safe way to launch a game nowadays, especially for us independent developers. At least financially, and as far as getting attention, it's terrific. The actual process of making it took a good while. I had to think about, well, how am I going to market this game and do a video, and how am I going to do the write-up? And I had a couple of guys from the publishing team help me with some ideas. But making the promo video was really tricky to do because I'd never made a video before on a computer, at least not a comprehensive one. So I took the family-friendly, accessible, approachable idea and marketed that idea.
Uh-huh. And what were your reward tiers?
Oh, the reward tiers. It was the lowest tier was to get a ROM of the game, and after that was you could get a loose cartridge of the game, and after that was you get the whole game complete in box with the manual, and then the highest level tier was you get a special copy of the game that's a limited edition, and there were 30 of those available.
Okay. So not much in the way of physical rewards.
Outside of the actual NES game cartridge, that's it.
That's good. That's good. Those can be thorny. And yeah, and you did just mention that this game does come on a real NES cart, right?
Yes, that's absolutely right.
Who did you partner with to make that?
With the 6502 Collective, and he approached me at the Portland Retro Gaming Expo where I was showing off a demo of this game. And I said, okay, sure. You got a good pitch. Let's go with it.
Like, and was it a limited print, or can you like still go and order a NES cart with Raleigh on it?
Yes, you can still order the cartridge on their website.
That's always good, because I know some of these are limited, some of them are not. This is not our first rodeo when it comes to talking about developing new games on old systems.
Yes, I think just because of the difficulty producing a large amount of cartridges, some people have them as limited, or for whatever various other reason.
Yeah, like I know some places it was pretty common to like get it as a ROM on a cartridge-looking USB stick.
Right. But that's not something that readily works in real hardware, or, whatever that might be. Yeah, because you can play NES games in much more than an NES these days.
Yep.
Anyway, so that was Raleigh. So I'm wondering how much of your current project you can talk about, because it's not a game per se. You're developing an engine for the NES.
Yes, that's correct. I'm developing an engine for the NES because I want to have something to make games for the rest of my life without having to worry about the really ugly side of building the foundation of the game.
Makes sense.
Right. But I'm guessing that the really ugly side might be cropping up here in the development of the engine.
Yeah, the engine is really hairy and difficult to develop, and I can borrow some things from Raleigh that I've already done, like rendering sprites and some sort of things like how do I program a sprite moving in an arc motion, or how do I have the base code for a player character, that kind of stuff. But with this engine, I wanted to have a bigger theater of play where you can the game can scroll in multiple directions rather than just left and right. And the big angle I'm working on is having complex surfaces in which the player can collide with on the screen, like slopes and curved surfaces, convex, concave surfaces like that. And I feel like that's a big potential that hasn't really been fleshed out on the NES. So imagine a game kind of like Sonic the Hedgehog where there's just like slopes and loops and stuff all over the place. But you can make a game with that kind of surfacing on the NES.
I mean, you could do it, like like Super Mario Brothers 3 had some of that stuff, and Sonic the Hedgehog did go 8-bit, though that was the Master System. But I'm not exactly sure how much of that you can push on the NES. But putting that aside, is how long have you been developing this engine for?
Well, I worked on it for about 4 months last year, and now I'm just starting to pick it up again in recent months. So just, less than 6 months. And a lot of it is just trying to figure out how it's all going to work.
Well, I mean, yeah. I gotta admit, I don't know what the time scale on such a thing would be, because we're not talking about a game. We are talking about an engine.
Right. And I plan to make at least one game for sure on this engine, but I can't really talk about that one too much.
And are you developing this engine all by yourself, or are there others involved?
I am developing it. I'm doing it all by myself. That's correct.
That sounds like a bit of a mountain to climb.
Well, I've been doing this for so long, and I kind of just know how to do it. I feel like if I get someone else involved, I have to do it on their time, and my time is really volatile and unpredictable, and then their time might be unpredictable, and then things will just get bogged down even more than they have to. But I can do this solo pretty good, so that's just the route I'm taking with it.
Good to know, I suppose. And how much more work do you think is left on the engine?
Probably a few more months if I stick to it pretty good, and then I can actually start making games on it.
And how versatile are you aiming to make this engine in terms of genre? Like, is this going to be for just making platformers, or could you make a Legend of Zelda type game with it?
Yeah, you could make a Legend of Zelda type game, or an overhead, or such as a race car game or something like that. Absolutely. I do want it to handle that kind of genre as well. Another genre is a shmup would be a good choice on that too.
Mm-hmm. And let's see here. And do you have any plans to license this engine out to others when it's done?
I don't, but if they want to try and read my code, I suppose I would be open to that.
Insert joke about the coder's gambit.
I mean,
yeah, if they can read my hieroglyphs, they're welcome to it.
Yeah. Right then. Right, I'll see if my colleagues here have any further questions for you.
I think I'm good.
I am satisfied.
Right. So, Chris, I want to thank you for taking time out of your schedule and being with us here today to talk about all of your NES development through the years. And hopefully good things come about with the engine development. one final question: how much does Raleigh cost if you wish to buy it?
The ROM costs $9, and the physical cartridge costs $60.
Okay.
I'm not amazingly happy about that price, but that's just how it is. And if you want to buy it, totally cool.
Okay. Yeah. So the game is Raleigh. It's available on Optivania.com, both in ROM form for $10 or $9. Is it $9 or $9.99?
It's straight up 9.
Okay. $9 and $60 if you want the physical edition. And be sure to pick it up today. Right, so I look forward to seeing what you have in development next, and when that is actually ready to be talked about above the engine, we look forward to having you back on the program.
Great, thank you very much.
No problem, no problem. Petty, play us to the next segment. All right, welcome to the topic of discussion. And so we're starting off the year of 2023 asking about the Nintendo Switch, because this has been a bit of a hot button topic, not just like in the last, say, week or so, but for the waning months. You could argue the entire lifespan of the system. But I think it's become really pronounced in more recent times. And that is the Nintendo Switch due for a hardware upgrade? And
so at the beginning, it was mostly just people bitching about Nintendo being okay with their hardware not being as powerful for most purposes. But as things have gone on, I think it's getting to the point where there are a few pressing reasons why it's going to start needing upgrades.
Well, yeah, there is a difference between arguing about this in, say, 2017 and 2018, when the Nintendo Switch was legitimately much more impressive. Yeah, its overall specs weren't as impressive as, say, the top-of-the-line iPhones, but it wasn't aiming for that market. Like, you got to remember, Nintendo, more than any other company, aims for cost-effectiveness most of the time. It's got a long history of this. Not every system adhered to this, like the Nintendo 64 or the GameCube comes to mind. But you look at the Game Boy, that is totally in the philosophy of the Nintendo Switch. In that, Nintendo grabbed some mid-range hardware and chipsets and went to town on it, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
I will note that in spite of the modest specs and power of the Nintendo Switch, it was a gaming revolution, if I'm being honest, because it successfully married portable and home console design for really the first time. Because people have been putting console games and shit like that on mobile devices for years up to 2017. But this actually worked because, you had the control scheme to and environment. How do I put this? nobody was really thinking of putting like Breath of the Wild on a portable on a fucking iPhone until
Some people want it, but we also call those people fucking crazy.
Mhm.
Well, I mean, it did eventually happen. We just call it Genshin Impact.
Yeah.
Like, that style did permeate into the mobile space. It's just it had to be done in a mobile way, i.e., packed with fucking microtransactions.
Right.
And also for what Nintendo was operating on, the Nintendo Switch was its most powerful hardware.
Yeah, it is actually better than the Wii U, just not by as much as people wanted.
Well, yeah, it's more powerful than an Xbox 360 or a Wii U, definitely a 3DS. It's like the problem was it's not, it was coming up against the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. To say nothing of, like today where we've got the Xbox Series X and the PlayStation 5. And we're and Nintendo's still using hardware and chips that are about a decade old now.
Yeah.
But that's not, that's just something that's that would affect porting. But on the flip side of things, the Nintendo Switch has demonstrated that it has just downright ingenious hardware, given some of the quote-unquote impossible ports that have been possible on the Nintendo Switch.
Yeah, it's definitely still possible to make many things on the Switch that look good, even by modern standards. And again, that's always partially been kind of their thing, is that they make up for some lack of hardware stuff by game design and aesthetics, but there are starting to be weaknesses.
The real problem is Nintendo's own ambitions are starting to really be hitched by the Nintendo Switch hardware. Splatoon 3, Bayonetta 3, Pokemon.
I think Splatoon 3's issues are more heavily in the friggin' network shit that they've always not been that good at. But yes.
Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is another one, and it's probably going to crop up again in The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom.
Probably.
So yeah, their own stuff is starting to have issues, starting to have like noticeable performance issues.
Yeah.
They are reaching the point where other companies are saying that, well, between them and other companies, where if they want to have a port, what you're going to get is the friggin' streaming version of a game, which is, in my opinion, not acceptable.
Especially with the Switch's lackluster Wi-Fi.
Yeah, and our country's lackluster Wi-Fi infrastructure.
Fair.
Those are the two big reasons. Just and so yeah, if they want to, like every other manufacturer has. I know this is just because Nintendo got the Switch out before it. But like it's getting to be where there's a new generation. There was already a half generation, and then there's a new generation of consoles since the Switch came out. And if people want any of those games on Nintendo platforms, there's going to need to be an improvement to do that.
Well, it's also people were expecting a Switch Pro at some point, and
yes,
from what the rumor mill, I guess, has been mentioning in recent months is that a Switch Pro was in development at one point, that point being 2019, but got scrapped in 2020.
Because COVID happened.
Chip shortages are a bitch.
Yeah.
Yep.
Not just COVID, but the chip constraints
Well,
that
I
have
think
only...
also around that time is when NVIDIA officially killed off the entire Tegra line, so they need to find a new processor for it.
Well, I think also Bitcoin mining was much more prevalent 2 years ago than it is today.
Well, not just
specifically with the graphical cards.
Fair, but that wouldn't really affect Nintendo because they're custom SoCs.
I'm talking about higher range stuff.
Yeah, they're still using custom chips. You can't exactly Bitcoin mine a Switch easily.
No, and once again, I'm talking about more powerful stuff.
Yeah.
How much more powerful, don't know, but like we do have other devices that can show how powerful a hybrid can be. Not cost effective, but a Steam Deck can run most games at 30 FPS.
I mean,
Yeah,
Steam
I'm still
Deck
kind
is
of looking into
expensive,
getting a Steam Deck.
but it's also about as close to cost as what a powerful gaming system of that caliber should cost. So
Right,
it's...
But here's the thing: you're not selling like 100 million units of a Steam Deck at that price, and that's the great dilemma Nintendo's facing right now. And they've flat out admitted they're really worried about coming up with a successor to the Nintendo Switch because, well, look at what happened last time that fucking happened.
Yeah, the Switch has been a huge success, and they don't want to Wii U it.
Yes.
Yeah,
like
the Steam Deck version you probably want for $530 is okay.
Yeah, it's also I have a feeling it's also Nintendo being Nintendo because people I think would be fine with a Switch Advance,
a Switch SP.
It's very important that it be backwards compatible is the real thing.
Yeah.
Right, but my point is, okay, you missed the window for the Game Boy Color, and it's time for the Game Boy Advance, which was it was a more powerful Game Boy,
right?
A much more powerful Game Boy with no fucking gimmicks attached to it.
Other than you needed more light than that could be produced by the sun to see the damn thing, but
that wasn't a gimmick. That was Nintendo being cost effective.
I know, I'm mostly joking with that one, but yeah.
But Nintendo hasn't done that since the days of the GameCube and the Game Boy Advance. No, it's always got to have some fucking gimmick attached to it. Even the Nintendo Switch is a gimmick. It's in the name. It's that you can switch it up from portable to home console. And, I'm not sure what they do for a follow-up. I mean, that's for Nintendo to figure out. But, I'm assuming that they learned from the Wii U, and it's not been that long. That just innovating for the sake of innovating or having a gimmick for the sake of a gimmick doesn't work out when it's your main fucking system. See also the Virtual Boy or any number of short-lived Nintendo peripherals that they put out. But, usually those are confined to the fucking Game Boy Advance link cable or something like that. And not, your mainline system. Or, and this is key here, Nintendo actually had ideas when it came to the Nintendo DS and the Wii a lesser extent, the 3DS, because really, I think only Super Mario 3D Land actually utilized the 3D gimmick for gameplay.
Hmm.
A few of them did, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and like also, I guess part of the thing is now with phones being so prevalent, Nintendo actually has real competition in the like portable space.
Well, Nintendo's had that for a decade plus. Like, I remember when people were talking about the iPhone as competition in goddamn 2009.
Hmm.
You know, and Angry Birds taking the world by storm, and you know, mobile phones are going to kill off every other form of video gaming
Well, at
somehow.
least now we actually have standards and like more ergonomically useful controllers, like Razer's. I believe it's called the Kunai, that you just slot your phone in it and go.
And also, phones have Bluetooth, so that there are other controllers that you can just Bluetooth connect.
Well, it's also, and the dumbest one of these was the post desktop world. Like,
For some people,
Now, a
yeah,
lot of
you
people
don't need
do
a
live that
desktop.
way now.
yeah, it's like it depends on what you're doing, but you know, they were doing that. They were like suggesting for the power user, like, you know, doing business on a fucking phone.
Yeah.
No, like, you know, at best, maybe you'll use your iPad for word processing
Hmm.
or spreadsheets,
Yeah.
but you're not doing that shit on a fucking phone.
Yeah, unless you're one of those weird people who uses like Samsung Dex and just slots your phone into a little dock.
Mm-hmm.
Well, also, we're talking about the phones of goddamn 2009 to 2010.
Oh yeah, those no way in hell. Phones now, maybe, but
You know,
that's a big maybe doing a lot of work.
yeah, it's just, it's just, it's not the ergonomic space for it.
Mhm.
See, also, you know, gaming, like, you know, there was an attempt to bring, you know, more traditional game experiences into the mobile market, but
Hi Stadia, hope you're having fun in hell.
I'm like, but here's the thing: those have been regulated to Apple Arcade or Netflix.
Mhm.
Not even joking. And that doesn't even have anything to do with the power. It has to do with the audience. You know,
Mhm.
the audience has been trained to play free-to-play titles, or as much as people hate the microtransactions, and this comes up. I've mentioned this in the reviews we do. No, it came up this past Sunday. You know, like, you're not going to be able to sell a $15 game on mobile unless your name is Minecraft.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you have to divide it up into chunks, or be part of a subscription service, or be free to play. That's just how it is.
Mhm.
You know, you can attempt, but you're not going to get a lot of sales, especially on Android,
Yeah,
because
we like our
piracy.
games free.
Well, it's like either your game's going to be free or your game's going to be free.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, literally, I think Minecraft has been the only exception there.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, Nintendo is probably due for a hardware upgrade. The system came out 5-6 years ago at this point, like
16, right?
2017. Like, it's almost 6 years old.
Yup.
So we're coming up upon the point where, yeah, like, Nintendo should be cranking out a new Switch, whatever that might be. Like, what form it's
The
going to
question.
take?
Hmm?
Yeah. I think what's probably concerning is Nintendo hasn't really been talking about a Switch successor. all that
Yeah.
much. You know,
Which may mean that they're still trying to get their act together, or it just may mean that they are, as they sometimes do, holding their cards kind of close to their chest.
right. Whereas with the Nintendo, well, sometimes with their systems, they do, you know, they haven't even announced a code name. You know, there's no Project Reality. There's no NX. There's no Revolution being talked about right now.
Mhm.
You know, there's Project Nitro. Undoubtedly they're working on that, but Nintendo is not talking about anything of that scope or range. Though that might change the next time a Nintendo Direct pops up, whenever that might be.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's like Nintendo's own ambitions are being stymied by their hardware, and I think that's the real indicator that it's time for them to move up in the world.
Mhm.
Right, and I think that'll about do it for this installment of Fragments of Silicon. Right, the week ahead. Let me see. No Friday show this week.
Woohoo! Sleep.
And we do have a new episode of Moonhawk Studios Presents happening in about half an hour, 20 minutes. Hang on, I gotta get to the right fucking page. Yeah, like that. Anyway, so coming up on the Sunday reviews, we'll be having reviews of Super 3D Noah's Ark, Dwarf's Adventure, Nescape, and Spiritual Warfare Wisdom Tree Collection. So, until next time, I shall wish you good gaming.